Hello guys, I have decided to put on my red lipstick because today we will talk about very toxic topics and maybe it will make the whole situation a little bit more fun. Plus, for me, red lipstick is definitely something I do not associate with the Soviet Union. But according to the Russian officials, Soviet Union still exists, and perhaps in their crazy minds, Ukraine is still a part of that monstrous Frankenstein. Putin's advisor, Kobyakov, on an international what kind of international forum is possible in Russia when nobody visits Russia now? But anyway, on that forum, he claimed that Soviet Union did not end its existence because of some legal procedures that was not fully observed. And according to him, the Soviet Union still exists, so congratulations, people in the Baltics, we are still inside the USSR. That is total BS because according to the similar legal procedures, we may say that the Golden Horde still exists. Well, it is obvious that the majority of Russians live in the past, and Putin is also the leader of the past. Russia has never produced any discourses about its tremendous future, and it's always about the past. They are looking for their success, glory, I don't know, anything in the past. They are not able to talk about the present. It's really miserable, gloomy, and they are definitely never talking about the future, because what awaits them in the future? We know the collapse and maybe more chances to become healthy and democratic. So that Kobyakov started saying that the Soviet Union was proclaimed by the deputies of one kind, and then the end of the Soviet Union was proclaimed by the deputies of the other kind, and thus the whole procedure is illegitimate, bringing us just a wonderful fact. Then Putin is the illegitimate president of the Russian Federation because there is no Russian Federation. Unfortunately, there are a lot of people who still live under the influence of old Soviet propaganda, which very organically continues in the propaganda of the Russian Federation. And I have come across comments when people tell me we did not have any problems with Soviet Union and Ukraine being a part of the Soviet Union, so maybe stay there. Well, I know that there are a lot of people totally, like irresponsible, people who do not care about other people. I know the reality. But trust me, new Soviet Union on this planet is bad not only for Ukrainians or Lithuanians or Moldovans. It is bad for the planet, especially if on the other side of the renewed Cold War we have Donald Trump. So let's start analyzing why are they saying it. Because in Russia, you never let anything out in this media environment if it was not blessed by the Kremlin gobbling. With many people knowing very little about Eastern Europe, about countries that were hidden behind the Iron Curtain, it is quite easy for Putin to manipulate opinions of some leaders. I am sure that Donald Trump does not know anything about the history of Ukraine, the history of Poland, or the history of Latvia. I'm not saying he is obliged, but he is obliged if he wants to influence some important decisions, which then influence lives of millions of people. I consider one of the greatest mistakes, sins, crimes of the 20th century is that permission for the communist regime to stay on such a vast, promising territory. Because after the end of the Second World War, half of the European countries were rebuilding, getting stronger, and literally half of the European countries were left behind that Iron Curtain, and it's way worse than just a curtain. And believe me, that resulted in deaths caused by the Soviet regime, by the communist regime, to many more millions of innocent, talented people. In times when I was already bored, in 1986, for example, one of the greatest modern Ukrainian poets, Vasil Stus, disappeared in Soviet labor camps. This happened already during my lifetime. So don't let them trick you with the fact that Soviet Union was different in the end. It was always bad. Once again, ask any countries, people from that countries, people from Lithuania, people from Moldova, do they want to return back to the Soviet Union? Ask countries that were influenced by it, that had communist regime, like Poland, do they want back? Everyone will tell you no. And it's not just because of that dependency from Moscow, not because of the suppression, Russification, but because of these physical threats. Millions were dying in prisons, in labor camps. Millions were deported to Siberia. That is why right now there are huge territories inhabited by Ukrainians, Poles. These are descendants of the people who were sent there. These are tragedies of families. And actually, this trauma of the Soviet experience, it's present in many of our everyday decisions. Ukrainians healing, even in this very difficult time, we are healing very quickly. And let me tell you like a funny story that many foreigners who travel to Ukraine observe, and I later had to introduce that to my classes of translation at the university. And if you want to hear more stories, remember to subscribe and join the community of the channel. We are 10,000 people already. I am very grateful that you love these personal stories of mine. So, it is very typical for a Ukrainian woman, for any, and I hate this term, but I will use it here, ex-Soviet or post-Soviet person, not even woman, to react in a wrong way when you compliment the person. Let's imagine that you compliment my dress, and a very typical reaction of a person traumatized by life in the communist regime will be to deny the beauty of that dress. And I remember my mother doing that. I remember my grandmother doing that. I've taught myself not to do that. So when you say, Anna, you have such a beautiful dress, a typical post-communist reaction would be, oh, that's an old dress, or oh, I don't think so, oh, the color is not good, it was cheap, or do you know what is the reason for that? People are afraid to be beautiful. People are afraid to be smart. People are afraid to be rich, to be successful. Because Soviet Union wanted to build a totally different type of person. And if you were too clever, too bright, too rich, too successful, you would definitely end up in a labor camp, or something worse can happen to you. That is exactly what we witness in Russia right now. You will not see a lot of successful startups there because either you become successful and then they take everything away from you. People will come, I mean mafia, they are represented on every level, like it's a very hierarchical system, but they will take away your successful business. Or you will simply understand that you have to give it, to sell it, and abandon that. Because as one of you once mentioned in the comments, and I always read all the comments, I learn from you a lot. I'm very grateful for that. So in Russia, you never become rich by creating. You never become rich by doing something what is close to your heart, like developing something. In Russia, people become truly rich only by stealing, looting, taking something away. That is what we witness with their wars, invasions, aggression, but this also is true about the relations inside Russia. Whenever you are an ordinary person without any corrupt support, without any, I don't know, relatives in FSB or in some political circles, and you start developing your business, you start it, and then you become successful, you will lose it. They will take away it from you. Tell me, please, if you know, what are the potential reasons for us to want or even consider to return to the Soviet Union? Do people in Ukraine want that? No. Do people in Latvia want that? No. Do people in Estonia want that? No. I am sure that even people in Belarus, suppressed, silently annexed by the Kremlin, don't want that. Because that was a disastrous, monstrous, and very unnatural project that collapsed because people need freedom, private property, beauty. It's okay to want all of that. You need to want to be successful. You may fail, but that's natural for a human being. Of course, we all understand success in our own ways, but you have your dreams, you have your plans. You don't want to be like those people in the documentaries from the North Korea. And right now we see this tremendous alliance between North Korea and Russia. They are twin brothers, and they want to expand that to promising countries like Ukraine or the Baltics. That is a sin, but that is also dangerous for the world, because by annexing territories, by stealing children, Russia builds up its army of hatred. We don't want that. We don't want back to the USSR. It was a fake project. It collapsed, unfortunately killing millions during that short existence. And by the way, remember that whatever they name it, the Russian Empire, the Soviet Union, the Russian Federation, it is one and the same disease: imperialism. I have watched a wonderful video on Anders Pak-Nielsen channel, who is a great YouTuber, where he analyzes why Putin also sees his war against Ukraine, against other Western countries, his hybrid warfare, as a defensive war. It seems crazy because it is, and what they protect in their crazy minds is this Russian Empire, this imperial myths, because they clearly understand losing Ukraine, losing other countries from this orbit of influence, even if they were not a part of the Soviet Union, they lose this influence at all, and they are no more a superpower. What Russians forget to see, forget to understand, is that they are not a superpower long ago, and that at least half of its existence, Soviet Union was not a superpower at all. Let's be realistic. It was a superpower for some decades, but only in some areas like space maybe, or human resources that it was prepared to send to various meat grinders. But in the core spheres of life, like economy, culture, like ordinary lifestyle, it has never been a superpower. I don't know people who dreamt of moving to the USSR or now to Russia. Even those crazy who constantly comment, they never want to move. They don't want to leave this Russia supportive comments below my videos from Tula, Ryazan, Tver, Belgorod. Somehow they keep doing that from the United States or from Italy or from France, which is absurd and another proof that most of such comments come from people who are supported by the Russian government. And the Russian government is ready to, invest more money in such comments than in the roads inside Russia. So if you look at this gang around Putin and Putin himself, you can clearly see that these are people from the past. And trust me, that past was bad. That's why we left it in the past. By the way, check my video about my early Soviet memories on this channel. It tells a lot about why we never want to come back to the USSR. And let me know in the comments below, would you like a video about my early school years? Maybe you wonder if I was a pioneer, or perhaps you understand it was pretty difficult for teachers to adapt to not just a new program, but a new country. They awaited, but still it was quite unexpected, this collapse of the USSR. It was a blessing, but I literally went to school a month after the collapse of the USSR. So if you want a video about that, let me know in the comments below. And it is a worrisome symptom, to sum it all up, that the advisor of Putin, Kobyakov, on some kind of forum starts speaking about war in Ukraine as an internal problem because Soviet Union still exists. In Russia, you never speak words they did not ask you to say, they did not make you to say. So perhaps this is one of the new Russian propaganda ideas that Putin and his mafia wants to push, and poorly educated people, I'm sorry, like Donald Trump, may start thinking about that. But if we choose this kind of approach once again, then maybe the British Empire still exists, or at least the Golden Horde. I do not remember any decrees announcing the end of its existence. This is absurd, but this is a very important reminder, first, to all the countries that were once occupied by the Soviet Union, second, to all the countries that were under the influence of communist regimes, third, to those countries involved in the Cold War, and another proof why it's so important to protect the international law, the world order. Because Russian war against Ukraine was not just the Russian war against Ukraine. It was the war against the world order, against the rules that helped us survive all of these decades. And here in Ukraine, we not only protect our future, we also protect the future of the democratic world. And oh my God, these are not just words. That is important. Nobody sane, nobody healthy wants back to the USSR. This Frankenstein collapsed, and the end of it will actually happen with the dissolution of the Russian Federation. And don't be afraid of that. That's a natural process that actually started long ago. Thank you for buying me coffees, becoming my patrons and sponsors of the channel. If you're new, please subscribe and share these videos, because that's important in the world still intoxicated by the Soviet and Russian propaganda. Follow me on other social media platforms. All the links you need are in the description of this video. And most importantly, thank you for wanting to know more about my part of the world and for standing with Ukraine and all the freedom-loving world. No to USSR, never again. Slava Ukraine!